Welcome to Touchline Talk by Soccerspective. I'm your host of Touchline Talk, Brandon Faust, and today we have a special guest, my friend Josh Brown, who is the head coach for the boys side at Covenant Christian High School in the Indianapolis area. Josh has been in and around soccer for a long time. He's coached for 20 plus years now at the high school level, has coached in club as well. Was a college soccer player himself, and just recently, after the first soccer state championship for the boys side in Covenant Christian School's history, coming off that state championship run, amazing, phenomenal season, a great guy, a great coach, and I think we're going to have an interesting conversation, especially around where is high school teams' place in the game, right? And a game that is often talked a lot about in the club side here in America. What place does high school soccer have? And so, Josh, welcome, man. Thanks for jumping in.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to be here.
So, quick icebreaker. We're asking this question throughout this series as we're doing these interviews. If you could change one rule in soccer, what would it be? At any level, you can think high school, club, pro, just something functional in the game. If you could change one thing, what would it be?
It's a tough question. I think kind of going back to you talking about club versus high school, I think for me, I don't know if I would change a rule, but I think what I would like to change is the fact that there's almost three different sets of rules for high school, club, and college. And so we have referees who might do a club game on Saturday, then come right to a high school game. And some of the penalties for some of the violations are different. For example, we had a game a handful of years ago where we should have won the game, ended up tying it, but the tie happened because we had a penalty kick, there's encroachment, and the referee inserted the club rule, which is a goal kick, not the high school rule, which is a retake. And so just those kind of small things. There's not a whole lot of big changes in the game, but there are enough distinctions where I think this make it easier on everybody if it was more consistent.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I think those are things that sometimes if you're only on one side or the other and you've been in both worlds, that you can see the differentiation of the implementation of rules, things like that. It gets pretty interesting. So, Josh, how did you get involved with soccer? Where did this love first develop as a player? And then how did that turn into being a pathway for you as a coach?
Yeah, so I started playing soccer when I was 5 years old, a little Optimus League. And a big part of it's because I was very small. And my parents didn't want me to get hurt playing football. So, I started playing soccer back then, mid 80s. And I was, a young kid and just kind of fell in love with it. Just kept playing all the way through. Started playing club, 14, 15, which was, there might have been three clubs in the whole 50-mile radius at the time. There wasn't very, very many. So, and then played through high school and was fortunate to play a little bit in college, but just always found my place there. For an undersized kid who was quick, it was kind of a little natural path for me, and then got into coaching. I just always loved the game. Honestly, coaching, I was out of high school my first day there, and there was a job posting I was 24, as a job posting for a JV coach. I literally walked out to the field, talked to the guy, and he was like, the job's yours. And I feel like an old man talking like that. I don't feel like that would happen nowadays, but that's how I started. So
That's awesome. I love it. What's give me one of your favorite memories from your playing days, coaching days? I know for me, still some of even playing at the next level in college, playing a little bit professionally. Some of my favorite memories are still from my high school soccer team, and
Oh yeah.
some of those things. But what was one of your favorite memories from your playing days back in the day, Josh?
I mean, so we won a state championship at my small Christian school when I was a sophomore, and I mean, I was able to start on that team. Play, I think we scored in our first tournament game. We scored a goal, and me and the other forwards kind of, ping ponged it back and forth, going down the pitch, and scored in 7 seconds. I think really scoring my first high school goal, I think, was just a huge memory. I still remember where we were at and the feeling of it, and that thrill of putting the ball in the back of the net for the first time in the high school setting was just huge.
I love it. What's one of your favorite memories from your coaching career now? I know you've been at it now for a couple decades.
It's been a long time. I really think, looking back, I've got so many. I think this season's going to be hard to top, just for the fact of We were number one all season. We were 19-1-1. Only team that beat us was a team that was two classes bigger than us. They beat us in penalty kicks. They had State Player of the Year on the team. We scored 90 goals, gave up 10. Um, we in the state tournament, we had to beat number 9, then beat number 2, then defending state champion number 3, and then winning the final 4-0 was, I mean, super memorable. I think one of the things I won't never forget is in that championship game, we scored our first goal, and it's like the roar of the crowd. It was almost just like a wave of
Mm,
sound carrying across the
mm,
field. I mean, we played in a huge environment. We played at the Mike at IUPUI, where play a lot of Indy 11 games, and it's a big environment. I mean, the field is
yeah.
huge. It's a big open space. So to hear that roar coming across the field, like it was just, I mean, that gives you chills. Um,
Mm,
so that's definitely one that's going to be hard to top for sure. But,
yeah.
I have a couple
Absolutely.
others. Like, I mean, I've had a few players go on to play like big time, like winning national titles at like IU. So watching them play on TV and going to their
Mm,
games and just like seeing them at that next level. I mean, that's so awesome. Like that's one of the reasons
yeah.
I love coaching is seeing these guys after high school.
I love that. Josh, who were your biggest influences in the game when you were growing up? I know a lot of people, probably in our generation or around our generation, we probably had a stronger tie in those days to our high school coaches versus our club coaches during that era of American soccer.
For
But who
sure.
were some of your biggest influences in soccer growing up that kind of led you down the path you're on now today?
So I mean, there's a couple guys who are a few years older than me who. I went to like a small private school that was K through 12, so they would have like open field in the summer, and there was no age group who was prohibited from coming. So I remember going out and just being welcomed by guys like Greg Davidson, who's the high school coach at HSE for the girls side and been a part of Indiana soccer forever. Um, Guys a couple years older than me who just kind of saw that I, loved the game and had a little bit of talent and just kind of like spurred that on for me to, hey, you're a part of this. Let's keep this going. Growing up in the 80s and 90s in soccer is, I mean, it was I mean, soccer is a small world, but I think, where I grew up and I mean, if you played soccer, people were like, what's that? I don't think I saw a game on TV till the '94 World Cup. I mean, that's just kind
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
how it was. So a lot of the influence I had were peers who played or guys who were older than me who were into the game too. Who at that point for someone you're playing a sport that's not very popular, the people who are older than you that play it like they're like your idols because hey they play
Mhm.
it too. They're really good. So honestly, just kind of friends older than me who played it were the ones who I looked up to, and they were very accepting of young people who wanted to play.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about your coaching journey and what that's looked like between club and high school and kind of why you've parked yourself more on the high school side in recent years. What's that journey looked like for you? You talked about kind of stepping into that JV coaching job as a young man and then kind of where's that gone from there?
So I took that job again when I was like 24. I was at that school for 13 years, 3 as the JV coach, and then the head coach moved to Colorado, and um, you know, I took that job there as a varsity coach. Thinking back on that interview, I think I interviewed in shorts and a t-shirt, like in the assistant AD's office, because, I mean, they didn't care about soccer. Like they were like, yeah, this school never had a winning season. They're okay, you're here, the guys love you. You want to do this, sure. And then we had some great success. Over the next 10 years, we won sectionals 3 times, had their first winning season in school history, had 7 winning seasons in 10 years, and um, had 3 players named County Player of the Year. Back then, the Indy Star would name like Players of the Year and Coach of the Year. I was named Coach of the Year twice by the Indy Star, so that was kind of cool. Through that, we had some club players who were playing at like a high level at the high school, and their dad was kind of like talking to the coach at the director of coaching at Westside United, and he's like, hey, this guy's doing a good job here, you should give him a look. So they gave me a call and, hey, do you want to start coaching club? So kind of got into it there. One season I probably was way overextended, coached my high school team, then 2 club teams with 2 young
Mm,
kids. I would not recommend
mhm,
that. Probably one
mhm.
of the hardest years of my life. And then just I just kind of fell in love with just building those players and working with a higher level of students than I had, maybe than the players I had at my high school. Very different games though. I mean, very different clientele too. for players who, you have grown up playing the game, and guys who's out there kind of like, hey, we're going to play for our high school because we love it. A little bit more athletic sometimes. And so I coached at Southport, which is that school, for 10 years as a head coach club for most of that time. And then I moved to Brownsburg High School, which was a mile from my house. Coached there for five years, and was a director of coaching a little bit at a club on the south side. A friend of mine, John Higgins, was down there, and he brought me in to run tournaments and be a director of coaching and do curriculum development. So I saw a whole different side of the
Mhm.
club side at that, as like an administrator and tournament director over being a coach. And then and working with Higgins was amazing. Like, he sees the game on way higher levels than I ever could, and just I learned a lot from him. And then after 5 years at Brownsburg, we'd had success early, um, and won a sectional title last three years. Struggled, and I was let go from that job, and landed at Covenant Christian, which is not too far from where we live. And it's been great. Won sectionals our first two years, and lost in regional finals my second year in penalty
Mhm.
kicks, and then won the whole thing last year. So when I moved over to Brownsburg last couple of years, I started coaching like younger club. I'd only ever coached like 14, 15, 16, all the
Yeah.
way up to 18.
Yeah.
Kind of those, back when MRL was kind of like the big hot ticket. There wasn't like 17 divisions of everything. It was like you had a handful of leagues. And interesting, I've seen that change. You remember one year at Westside United, I was coaching the '94 second team, and we had the top team in the state, and then our second team was the top five team. We had 90 kids at tryouts, and we kept
Mm.
two teams. And look, you go to a club tryout now, they have 90 kids, they're going to make nine teams.
Yeah.
But it was like,
Yeah.
no, we're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
keep two. We're keeping two. We're keeping the best, and that's it. And
Wow.
so, um, I think honestly, high school, I think I just love it so much more because, for club, it's almost like the players are there for themselves to build themselves as players. And I get that. It's a great need for that. You've got to
Yeah.
get better. For the high school, though, it's like you're playing for something more than yourself. Like, you're playing not only for the players who are currently there for your team, but there's just like that bond of brotherhood from guys who wore the jersey 15 years ago, and they
Mhm.
still. I mean, we had people coming to our state championship game who played soccer at Covenant, 15 years ago, and it's
Mm.
like, you if you're at a club side and you're like, hey, we're going to go play for a national title. If I played for that club 15 years ago, I might be like, hey, that's cool. Saw it on social media. I'm not going to go to the game. So I
Right.
think the high school side, you can really dive into the kids and build
Mm.
them, and like you are more of you're. I mean, we're with them a lot. I mean, I know the
Yeah.
season's short, but I mean, it's 6 days a week. They probably spend more time with me than they do their own parents during the season.
Mhm.
But just where we can come together as a group and build something as a common collective for something more than just ourselves, and you really get to pour into
Yeah.
their lives, and um, see them on a daily basis, and just kind of help mold them and shape them. Which that's what I think coaching is. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think when I was coaching club in high school, I felt like the high school was more of that, and the club side's more like, hey, how do I become a better coach? How do I work with these kids? How do I help get these kids where they want to go to the next level? Um, and that's changed a lot too. I
Mhm.
mean, man, the guys who were going to college to play 5 6 years ago, it's a lot harder for them now. Just a shift of how, at least on the men's side of how the
Yeah.
college game has
Yeah.
changed. So
Yeah.
mm,
Talk to me a little bit about, as we're talking about coaching, how has maybe your approach or style changed a little bit? Because high school soccer is a different animal, because for the
mhm,
most part you're going to have these guys 2 3 4 years, right? You
yeah,
are, especially at a smaller school. You're going to have probably guys for 3 or 4 years, and they're coming back. You get to install a system, where in club, it's going to change, right? Like people, kids are going to change clubs, or whatever that looks like. How has your approach or your leadership style changed a little bit with the kind of more access,
I think
relational,
I
but even
lost
though
you.
it's a much shorter, season, with those guys?
So I think the way I look at it is with high school, like, you got to build a whole program. And so, I mean, for club, you have these 18 guys, maybe 16, 17, but it's like, okay, this is what we have for this year. And it's almost, you got to look at like 1 year at a time, because if you lose one or two guys, Like then, okay, do I have to replace them? What can we do? It's totally different. But for high school, like for the most part, you know what you have coming back.
Hmm.
So like the way I look at the season is, it's, hey, we have to prep for this season, but also like so we have to. I mean, I think one of the things that I like about high school soccer so much more is like you're right. You've got four years, and even if you win the whole thing, you're playing 22, 23, 24 games. So there's an end in sight. I feel like sometimes
Mm.
for club, hey, we're going to play 30 games this season. We lost on Saturday. Hey, we got a game on Tuesday. There's always something. And for high school, you have conferences, you have sectionals, you have these things that like that. There's kind of the games matter more. Um,
Mm.
so you can win a league and club, and depending on your league, you may get a trophy. You may say, hey, cool, we're going to get promoted. Sometimes that promotion is not the best thing for a team. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you're in a weak division and you win that, and then you move up, and then okay, now you're playing against some whole lot tougher competition that you really probably shouldn't be playing with. But um, high school, you've got to look at like the long game. You got to look, okay, we have these players who are coming back. How do we develop them now so they can benefit us in the future? And you have to look at each individual player and how you can help them become better this season and for the future, because you know what you get for the most part, um, and you just have to really focus on, again, not only this current season, but how do we get these guys ready for the next season when we have to,
Yeah.
try to do this again.
Yeah. Yeah. Josh, what continues, you've been at it for a long time, and there's probably some young coaches watching this. I remember jumping in, my first similar story to you. I was a JV coach at my alma mater, which was really cool to kind of pay it forward and come back there. It's kind of how it started. I started coaching with high school soccer before club and all that kind of stuff. Um, what's been exciting? What keeps you coming back? Like especially as life, you have some people that we're going to interview on this podcast, like their full-time job is soccer, right? And others of us, we have different careers. That's been the case for you. It's the case for me. And others, we have other careers, but soccer's been this huge part of it as we've continued to coach. There's sacrifices you have to make. What keeps you coming back to that? Especially as your own kids are involved in sports and activities, and I know your boys are pretty active and stuff. What's exciting to you? What keeps you coming back?
I think it's just those relationships and being able to pour into these young men and help them just become better people. I mean, I do love the game for sure. But even when I think back about some of my best memories of high school, I mean, of playing and coaching, like I remember the games for sure. I guess I'll tell memory about like scoring my first goal, but like those times with people are a huge part of it too. Like I remember going like on trips, overnights to hotels, bus rides with college teammates, like. Um,
Mm.
so just that capacity to be able to pour into these young men and teach them about life through sport. Um, I think it comes down to it, especially like a high school side where you're not paying to play. It's one of those. It's like this is a microcosm of like what life is like. If you want to get
Mm.
better, if you want to play more, then get better. If things aren't going well, how do we work it out? Okay, we got these problems we have to solve. How do we solve them? And I mean that's what life
Yeah.
is. I mean life's going to throw some. We've had I think we can all probably remember the toughest losses we've ever had, and like on the field, off the field, like you're going to have them. How do you pick up and keep moving forward?
Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Josh, as we shift gears a little bit, what do you see right now? I think you have such a unique vantage point in conversations we've had previously because of your proximity with club at a high level and your proximity with high school soccer at a high level. Sometimes you get people chirping that have never really been involved with one side or the other. I think you have an interesting vantage point in the longevity as you've seen club soccer change, you've been involved with it. If you've seen high school soccer change, you've been involved with it. What do you see as the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity in youth soccer development today, especially on the boys' side?
So I think the challenge is, I mean, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and I think we give up on kids, and kids give up on themselves, and maybe where they're at too early. I think you
Mm.
know there's definitely times to shift clubs. I've done that with my own son. Like with this, he played for the same club for since he was 9, and this year he's a U15, and we change clubs. A little bit better opportunity for him with just some opportunities with a top team, the more consistent training, and honestly, we moved because we may be moving to that area soon. So a few things there, but I think a lot of times you see, I mean, the statistics show most kids quit playing organized sports by 13. So that's young. So what are we
Yeah.
doing with that? But I think the challenge is there's so many parents who, oh, this team's not winning, we have to go win. And just because you're winning games doesn't mean you're learning the game or you're getting better. I think the biggest challenge we face is we focus too much on the results at a young age and not enough on the development. Are these kids getting better? Are they learning the technical skills? I don't think it matters if you win when you're 10. I don't think it matters if you
Mhm.
win when you're 12. I mean, I'm seeing things now where, these quote unquote elite players when they were 9 and 10 are getting to 14, 15 now, and they're having a hard time getting on the pitch
Yeah.
because what they did when they were younger is not working when they're older because they've not developed. And I think in America we're so drunk on athleticism, where it's like, hey, this kid's a stud athlete at 11 and 12, and then by the time he's 15, 16, it's like, yeah, he's athletic, but he's not a great player. And so I think
Yeah.
we have to keep the long game in mind of, hey, it is a journey, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and letting the kids develop and allowing the development to mean more than the wins and the losses. I think opportunity wise, man, I look, there might have been 3 or 4 clubs in the area when I was growing up. You can throw a rock and hit 7 clubs from wherever you're
Mm.
standing, at least where we live. So opportunities are there. There's more soccer on TV. There's more education. There's more training. There's more people coaching now than there was 30 years ago. So I think the opportunities are there. I just think you have to be able to find what fits for you and stick with it, and
Yeah.
stop always looking for the next best thing. I mean, the truth of the matter is, I mean, soccer is any sport is, but soccer for sure. It's like, hey, if you're good enough, you're going to be found out, and
Mhm.
if you're performing, you're going to play. I have parents ask me all the time, what can my kid do to play more? Well, if there's better players on the team, they need to get better. Because I mean, when it comes down to it, I want to win, and I'm not going to play. I mean, outside of attitude or things we're trying to work on with the player, if he's got a great attitude and he's one of the better players, he's going to play because
Yeah.
it's the best chance to win. I think the hard thing with the youth right now is, and I don't know how much we're teaching them that perseverance and that grit. It's like, hey, things aren't working out for me here. I'll go to a different club.
Mm.
Um, things aren't things aren't going well, and there are definitely times to change for sure. But I think we're just we'll go find something else for you to we'll find a better place for you to play. And I think we're seeing that at the college levels with like the transfer portal for different sports. We just have a new transfer rule for Indiana high school. We'll see how that plays out. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think we could do a good job as a society of teaching these kids, like, hey, if it's not working out for you, that's a life lesson too. Perseverance and grit are
Mhm.
two huge character traits that we'd love for these kids to develop. And I don't know if we're always allowing that to happen.
Yeah, that's good. It is good. I think there is, at the younger ages that we'll see some teams and coaching, my kids and stuff, you'll see some teams that just put their most physical players out there. And then in 2 years, you watch them, everyone else catch up to their physicality. And then their technique has left them behind in the
Yeah,
dust, right?
for
Because
sure.
the focus on development hasn't been there. I've even seen in high school soccer, you'll have someone come in as a freshman or a sophomore, and they might have some technical ability, but physically they're just behind. And then boom, their junior year, they're maybe your best player, right? And so I think even
For sure.
sticking long term, that is something I appreciate about the high school side is you have a coach that's going to be, as long as the coach is still there, right? 3-4 years with that crop of players, and you get to identify that play style and pour into them in a little different way than the club side. Josh, what would be your advice to someone who's trying to get involved in coaching? Right, I think a lot of time I talk to players all the time, former players I used to coach, people in the community. Hey, how do you get into coaching? How do you get into coaching? How do you get into coaching? And yes, it might be a little different than when you and I started, right? There was a little bit
Mhm.
more ease or simple process, if you will, not as many candidates, those kinds of things. But what would you say to somebody who either wants to get involved specifically on the high school side. How do people get involved with that? What would you encourage them to do? What are some things they can get involved with to kind of get involved with a high school program?
Yeah, I do think there is. I think high school can be difficult just for the fact of, we practice at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Some schools practice at 3. Like, so, I mean, it can be difficult for sure. Like, you've got to have a job that lines up with it. I know you and I have talked about, working together, and it's just families and jobs.
Yep.
It's a tough one for sure. But in general, whether it's club or high school, I think a big part of it is, um, you know, go ask, like, go ask your local club. Go ask you if you know someone coaching high school. Hey, can I come out? Can I volunteer? Um, High schools are going to have a little bit less resources than clubs might have. Clubs might be able to throw $500,000 at you, get you some gear, something. Um, but honestly, if I had someone who wanted to come be a volunteer and I knew they were going to be there and reliable, I'm like, yeah, sure, you can come and come and see what we do. I think the big thing is just, and I'm sure I fell in this trap a lot when I was younger. Like, I thought I knew everything. And I was 23, 24. I'm like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I can run everything. And I think the big thing is going in and and admitting, like, hey, I'm here to learn. Um, Throw some ideas out there. Don't just sit back and watch. Like, do that for sure. Be a sponge. Soak in everything. But also, like, don't be afraid to give your ideas, and don't be afraid to take the criticism of, no, that's not going to work, and here's why I know that's not what we're trying to do. Um, I think the biggest thing is just go and be around older coaches. Watch them coach. Watch them. It's not. I've learned that coaching's not a lot of. I mean, yes, the tactics and the systems, those are great. I think the things I've learned the most about coaching is when I've taken, like, my C license, or when I worked with ODP with some high level coaches, and just the little phrases that they use and things that I picked up, like, oh man, that's great. I'm gonna steal that. And
Hmm.
just those little things of watching other people coach has probably been the best thing for me. Um, and so I think, coach with somebody else, coach with someone older, and again, take everything in with, as a sponge, because you don't know everything. And I think the hard shift sometimes for younger people is the shift from a player to a coach is not an easy one, because
Hmm.
you see the game differently. And even with my younger assistants, there are times we've had debates about, oh, why is this game scheduled here, and things like that. And I'm like, I'm looking at it from a high level, bird's eye view, and not like, and not as a former player at the school or something like that. I think it's different, and you just have to accept that, like, these people, they're not saying they're always right, but they do have a more of a knowledge base, and just
Yeah.
learn from them, and just
Yeah.
go out and do it. I think some of the
Mm.
best things, I let my assistant coaches run training sessions quite often, and there are times where, like, they explain to me what they're going to do, and I'm like, okay, knowing, like, this is where you're going to have a problem. But, like, if I told them that, they would be like, no, this is a good session, and I'm like, okay, then run it. And then when the problems come up, it's like, okay, now how do you fix it? Because there's been times we've all thrown a session out there, like, okay, this is not going well. How do we adjust it? What do we do to make it better? We're
Mhm.
not trying to solve the
Mhm.
problem here. So, just as a young coach, be willing to make mistakes and be willing to learn and get involved. I think we hear there's a huge, referee shortage. I think there's a huge coaching shortage too. Like,
Yeah.
I look at there's the generation a little bit younger than me. There's a lot of guys I was coaching with at club, 10 years ago. Very, very few are still coaching. Um,
Mhm.
there's a huge gap in, like, the who's coaching. And I think, you talked about the high school side. High school side is interesting because you've got guys who've been coaching for eternity. Um, but I go to these coaching meetings, and I don't feel old until I go there, and it's like, yeah, I've coached for 20 some odd years, and there's some guys who've coached for 30, but a lot of us, there's like a small little club who's done it for a long time, but there's a lot of new faces every single
Yeah.
year. And um, if you want to get involved in coaching, I mean, find your local place and volunteer. And local high school, I know high school coaches are dying to get people, just because we
Mhm.
have. I mean, I've got 40 kids at my program. We just have JV and varsity. If you have a freshman team, you could have 60, 70 kids, and I
Yeah.
mean, even if you've got 3 or 4 people on your staff, that's a lot of kids. So,
Hmm.
you know, get involved, I guess, is the biggest
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think raising your hand, taking that step. I think a lot of times it's like, well, I'm not going to coach unless I can get paid, and the head coach, stipend or salary or whatever that is. But I think, just getting involved. I think that's how most of us, we raised our hand. Because if you're not passionate about the game, you'll get found out anyways, whether you're paid or
For sure.
unpaid, right? Like you got to show up. It's from what you're allowed to do in the off season, what you're allowed to do in season, all that stuff. Like you do have to want to do it, even if you're getting paid
Oh
okay to
yeah.
do it. You really have to, make some lifestyle changes and things around it. So, Josh, let's get into this next segment about what's maybe an unforgettable moment from your time in soccer. Maybe something funny, inspiring, unusual that stood out to you. A lot of talk about coaching. A lot of times it's tactics and X's and O's and winning and all this stuff. But what was maybe just a memorable, unforgettable moment for you?
So this is pretty personal. It's from my coaching days actually. So when I was coaching at Southport High School, they never had a winning season. We started to win. They never won a sectional. Um, so this is 2010. Back then, sectionals were 2 games in a day. So we've come a long way with what we know is better for players and things. But you would
Mhm.
play the semifinals in the morning and the finals at night. Um, my wife at the time, she passed away a couple years ago. But when I got up that morning to get ready for sectional semifinals, and she's not in bed. She was our son was born. Our second son was due to be born right around that time, and she's in active labor. So I was like,
Oh my
okay, what
goodness.
are we doing? And so she's like, go coach the game. Come to the hospital after, and we'll go from there. So I went and coached the game. We won 2-0.
Oh my
Go to the
goodness.
hospital afterwards. I'm sitting there. I was actually watching game film at the hospital. So she was okay with it. We're totally fine. I was watching game film at the hospital. Son Wes is born. And then about an hour and a half later, it was like, I'm like, hey, finals are about to start. She's like, I'm just going to sleep. Go ahead and go. So went to the game.
Wow.
We won our first sectional in school history. We won 3-2. It was kind of cool. There was an article in the paper kind of written about it. I've got it framed at my house. But that was a
Mm,
kind of crazy day. But it's really
yeah.
cool because that's like, of my three boys, he's the one who's my soccer junkie, and so he's
Yeah.
been on the sidelines. He's grown up on the field. He's been on the
That's cool.
sidelines for almost every game at Covenant. He was like our unofficial photographer this season.
Mm.
So I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that story represents her so well, of her support of you and belief in you and the game being a part of your family. That's a pretty that's a pretty special one right there. I love that. Josh, what's the best piece of advice you've received in your soccer career, whether as a player or a coach?
Um, I think some of the best advice that I got was, if you don't know, ask. And
Mm,
sorry, I said that wrong. If you don't ask, you don't know. And so I think that's true for a
mm,
lot of life, but for soccer, like, we're working with players and kids, and no matter what we do, it's about relationships, and it's about how
yeah.
we work with them. Um, and so, it's kind of changed the way I even parent in my own teaching. If you don't ask, you don't know. And so, if someone's having, if a player is just off that day, like, I think sometimes we as coaches assume, oh, they're just rubbish today. They're having a bad day,
Mm,
or like his touch sucks today. Like he maybe, but I think, sometimes if we don't ask, we don't know. And so, I actually had a story from, I was much younger, but I had when I was coaching at Southport, we had one of our guys who just had a really bad game. Like he was our top player, and he was awful, and we were riding him all game long. Like, come on, man, you got to do better, pull him out, try to encourage him. And after the game, I was like, hey, that was what was up? Like, you were just really off today. Like, man, we need better from you if we want to, contend for a sectional. And he goes, Coach, I'm really sorry. My grandpa died today. And I was like,
mm,
dude, why didn't you say something? Like, why
yeah.
didn't, but, looking back, as, now, if I've having players who are having bad days or kind of reading their body language, we'll go over me and one of my assistants. I'm kind of like, hey, what's up today? Like, you just seem kind of off. Is there something going on? Girl problems. Did you not sleep last night? Everything at home fine? And so we kind of dig into those questions now, where I think we look at
Yeah.
more of it. Hey, I need to make sure these guys are here to play a game, but the other stuff doesn't matter if life's not going well.
Hmm.
And we know
Hmm.
from you're not going to play well if life is going crappy. It's just not going
Yeah.
to happen. So I think the biggest thing is, and even not even with like that development, but sometimes it's like I've gotten to the point where probably the last 8-9 years with coaching, during the midpoint of the season, we'll have a day where I'll just have a check in with everybody. Hey, how's the season going for you? I mean, we could
Hmm.
be 11-0, and my question is, hey, how's the season going for you? And I get, coach, it's not going great.
Hmm.
And it's like, really, we're undefeated. You're on track to be a letter winner. What's going on? Well, I thought I'd be playing more, or I'm having problems with this person. But those are things that we don't know if we don't ask. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a huge one for me, is just really diving in and say, hey, asking so we can know. Because I mean, I read a lot, and when I read a book a handful of years ago that was talking about just like relationships and like what we think we know. And they did this study with even like spouses. Hey, what's your spouse thinking about, or how would they answer these questions?
Hmm.
And it was something to the point of like spouses thought they could tell their partner's answers within like 60%, and it was like 12. And it's like, if your own
Hmm.
spouse doesn't know the answer to these questions, how do we know the answers to people to
Yeah.
kids? And again, my 45-year-old mind and a 16-year-old is not going to be the same.
Mm.
So that's
Yeah.
one that
That's
I
so good.
really kind of take on. I kind of like think about that a lot. Like, just ask direct questions. And sometimes it
Yeah.
has to be more, how's your day, is kind of a crappy one, because it's like, I mean, I can
Yeah.
say fine. I mean, and then you move on. You got to really kind of get to the root, and get to know the people, and just kind of ask, hey, I see you're having a rough day today.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
is there something going on?
Well, yeah, and we never know. Well, like you said, we don't know what we don't know, and so sometimes it's just, hey, how is this part? Or how's this aspect of your life? And I think that's a whether you like it or not, when you're in the position of coach, it's an influential role. It's
Yeah,
shaping
it is.
something, it's shaping an environment, it's shaping a culture, and you might, as a coach, have the only opportunity to provide positive culture that they've experienced in their life, whether at school or at home or in other sports or activities or their first job or whatever. And then those are principles that carry, whether they go on to have some great soccer career or not. Those are things that shapes the trajectory of somebody's life, right? And you have
Hmm.
to remember, even a 16-year-old is a child, right?
Oh, yeah,
Like they
they're
might do some
kids.
amazing things on the pitch, but like these are kids, and creating a safe, wonderful environment and that holistic nature of development that I think can come with that high school side. I think there's some club sides that are trying to figure out, how do we capture that culture?
Yeah,
How do we embrace that and embody that and multiply that through our club? But I think it is something that there's a little bit of a hack when you're playing, coaching high school soccer, that it can be built in, that community in some respects. All right, here's a fun question before we get to a resource spotlight and as we wind down our conversation with Josh. If you could have dinner with three soccer players, coaches, figures, past or present, who would they be and why?
all right. Oh man, so I think I'd go with two coaches and a player. Sir Alex Ferguson, I think he's like the upper echelon for sure. um, I think the modern game. I think Pep has kind of redefined the way that the game is played. Um, I think I think he's a great coach. I like to I think he listening to interviews with people who've played for him. He's changed the way. I remember listening to an interview with like Thierry Henry, and how he like understood the game better after talking to Pep. And I'm like, this is one of the greatest
Hmm.
forwards of all time. And so I
Hmm.
think just picking his brain would be fun. And um, I'm a huge Wayne Rooney fan. I was a huge Man United, and I loved Rooney growing up and watching him play. So I know he's not like Messi or Ronaldo, but from a guy who's played and wasn't like was kind of like a like a meathead growing up, but just a soccer junkie. Had to know the game. Had to,
Mhm.
I read an article. He was visualizing the game when he was 14 in bed. No one was talking about visualizing the game,
Yeah.
that long ago. But a guy who had his playing career now got into coaching and kind of struggled through it. Just it would be fun just to have a chat with him for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. When you think even like the pace of the game, the Sir Alex teams, you might line up in a classic 4-4-2, but they might play some they played quickly. There was
They
sometimes like
did.
diagonal
I mean,
balls, all
Scholes could play the ball to Giggs like 60 yards right
Yep.
on his foot, and yeah, they did. Like it's I don't know. I think one thing that the game has definitely changed, but I think we've gotten to a point where like, oh, possess, 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 possess. The goal is to get forward and score. Like I want to possess,
Yeah.
but I want to possess like with purpose to get forward and
Yep.
score. And you look at some of those old Manchester teams where like you've got, I mean, Scholes could have hit like the flea off a dog at 50 yards, but
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
guys who they were getting forward, like
Yeah.
they were getting forward and like they were fun to watch. And I think if you kind of
Yeah.
look at the game from a different perspective, oh, they didn't possess well, like yeah, but they scored and they won, and
Yep.
that's what it comes
And
down to.
yes, stop the other team and for us to score more, and that's the game. I think
That's
there
the
are a lot of
basic
people
game.
who are trying to even at the club level, you don't see it as much at the high school, teams, but you'll see it in some where they're trying to just build out of the back when they have no business doing it because they've watched, Guardiola teams do this,
Yeah.
and it's like if you don't have the personnel and players to do that, you probably shouldn't really do that. Or
No.
it becomes like a very scripted things, and so instead kids are learning how to play off a script as opposed to playing with options and making choices in real time, which is
Yeah.
really fascinating. We're watching that a lot right now in the club side that I'm coaching is we'll go up against some teams and you just memorize their script very quickly. It's like, oh, you did this. They did the same thing 3 times in a row. And while there's some principles of that script, I get well intending, it's removing choice and decision from the kid, which is a huge last I checked, that's a huge part of the game is what are my options? What are my choices? How do I make the best
Well, yeah,
choice?
and like we're not on
Moving
the
forward?
field to be able to do that for them. And so my son
Yeah.
plays a goal, plays he's a keeper, which I love it as a coach. As a parent, I'm not always a huge fan of, but he so they want to take these short goal kicks, and there's times where he's been like reprimanded for hitting a ball 30-yard chip to a teammate's feet, and they're like, oh, Wes, play it short. And he's like, but the guy was open. Like they had
Yeah.
three guys on top of the box. I found him open. He turned, made two passes, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
don't take that away from the kids. He had a game this past Sunday where they had three guys up top, kind of pressuring the kick, and the six kind of checks to the ball, and he fires a shot right to the six's feet, and the kid turns and
Mm.
goes, and they were like, "Oh, that was a good idea." I'm like, "Yeah, let him make a decision. Like, let these
Yeah.
kids play."
Yeah. Josh, what is a resource? You had mentioned, coaching courses and learning from other coaches and things like that. What's maybe a resource you would spotlight to somebody who's coaching? Maybe they've been doing it for a while. Maybe they're just starting out. What's a resource that you would encourage people to lean into right now?
So, a couple things. First of all, I would say, I mean, I'm a big reader. I read a ton. I think there's some great leadership and coaching books out there. Um,
Mm,
I read one recently called "The Score That Matters" with that's written by Ryan Hawk and Brooke Cups. And it kind of really was a theme for our season this year. It was just,
mm,
it takes, which is kind of the reason I love the high school side too. Is like it's the one couple of the themes of it are we are built for community, and that purpose requires togetherness.
mm,
And you don't get to the top of the mountain by yourself. And just I read a lot. I think we can pick up some great places from some great tips and things from reading. Kind of like a specific tool. I brought it with me. I had this coaching notebook
mm,
that is from a brand called Dutkig, and I love it because like it's got. I do my whole season in here. It's got plenty of pages, but it's one of those. It's got like a field on one side and notes on the other. And I want one thing I would say to young coaches too: um, write down all your practice sessions, get an
mm,
idea of I have every practice session we write down in here after it's over. We have a quick chat. Hey, what went well with my coaching staff? What didn't go well? Make notes about certain players. Circle this activity. Hey, this went well. Let's come back to this. Um, okay, this one was crap. We got to figure out a way to make this miss better. I keep all my game notes in here, my hot takes and my cold takes. Um, I think the cold takes a lot better than the hot takes. So I've gotten better about that too. I think early in the career it was like I would, get fiery about a player and then watch film like, oh crap, that player wasn't responsible for that. So,
Yeah.
but I love their notebooks. I have one for each season. I get them for my coaching staff, and now I have a collection of about 10 years of coaching. I can go look back and see what we did and take some of my own ideas or modify things.
That's great. I love that. No, I think that debrief session with your coaching staff or captains or things like that are super valuable to say what went, what was good, what do we need to adjust for next time, what do we need to build on. And I think having, like you said, you heard it from the man, have a written documented plan, whether that's a digital
Yes.
thing that you're doing or whether that's like handwritten out, like actually have a plan, and if you need to adjust things on the fly, but here's the goal, here's the objectives, which I think is a huge thing. I've watched a lot of coaches just wing it and they don't remember what they did, what they learned from it. They didn't take notes on it. I think that part of, the US soccer education really pushes that stuff, but I think it's something that's really good for coaches at any level to
I would say
practice and
writing it
to
down is
apply.
almost probably better than. I mean, I have a whole bunch of stuff on digital platforms, the U.S. Soccer's Coaching Center, and I put all my drills I had in there and would just like, click and pull them out and print stuff off. I think when you actually if you have time to write your sessions out, it
Yep.
makes you think about it. It's easy to like click a
Yep.
mouse button, pull these out. Okay, I've got my session, but the
Yep.
actual this is what we want to do. Writing it out, because for me, okay, this is who I want in groups. This is what I want to do next. I put times down. Like I have times like 4 o'clock huddle and talk, 4:05 warm up, 4:15. So we are following a script. And again,
Hmm.
sometimes you've got to change it. And there are times where we go longer, we go shorter, but you're right, have a plan. Don't just go out there, oh, we didn't do this well last time, we're going to practice this today. Have a plan. You have to
Yeah,
have a plan.
absolutely. Well, we want to land with our last rapid fire question. Josh, if you could manage or play for any team in history, who would it be and why?
Manchester United, they can fire me any day of the week. Like, I'm not happy with the current state of the club. They're a long way from where they used to be. But I mean, I grew up watching those. That class of '94 and Giggs and Scholes and
Mhm.
Rooney, and I wasn't a huge Ronaldo fan when he played for them the first time, but just those teams were. I mean, man, they were just they're part of what made me love the game.
Yeah.
And so, being able to be a part of that organization in any aspect. I mean, the crazy fantasy is working with them, coaching with them. I'd love to go to a game there someday. That's like my ultimate bucket list. Is
Yeah.
you know go sit in the go sit at the end at Manchester United. So
Yeah.
they're
I
definitely
love
it for
that.
me.
I love that. No, and I think, a lot of people who are younger than us don't realize like they were, one of the only teams you could watch, like even on
They
pay-per-view. I
were
remember paying like
for
pay-per-view
sure.
matches to watch Manchester United Arsenal, which was the fixture during
Yeah,
some of those days, right? And it was like the only now there's like if you pay a subscription to Peacock, you can watch all of the Premier League all season, right? Which that was not the case. So it's come a long way. The game has grown a
yeah.
ton
And I
now
kind
to
of
the
get
fact where
crap.
we can watch. What's that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get crap from like my younger assistants. Oh, I like Tottenham. I like this. Why do you like Man U? That's like watching the Yankees. Or I'm like,
Right.
all I could watch growing up. I mean, I'm a Notre Dame football fan for the fact that when I was growing up, you couldn't watch anything else on TV in Indiana
Yeah.
but Notre Dame football. So
Yeah.
no, and they don't realize how good those teams were. Like
Yeah.
they were the precedent back then for sure. But yeah, the younger generation doesn't realize what we grew up with. Where again, I didn't watch a game on TV until I was 14,
Yeah.
and I mean, my son is 14. He's probably seen 100 games on TV. We've been to four or
Right.
five live, so it's just so
Right.
different.
Yeah. It really is. Well, we want to say, Josh, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing part of your story. Thank you for sharing your insights, wisdom about the game, especially those who are considering, the, do you become a high school coach, club coach? There kind of is this idea. Yes, there's some people who do both, and there's rules and things around how you do that and don't do that. But really, catching the stories behind why high school soccer still has a huge place in the game today in America. It's a huge part of the development of young players. And I think it actually benefits clubs when they have a great high school coach that these players are playing underneath. obviously, the rule where like only like 7 players can be from the same high school and things like that. So it's a big part of their development as they give their fall season to their high school team. And Josh, we just want to say thank you for jumping on, being a guest here on Touchline Talk. We want to say thank you to the listeners for jumping in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.